Hey there, my name is Chris Acton with Acton Creative, and this is a handwoven experience. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the bold and beautiful basket weave. Now, I know you may be thinking, we're making baskets? Turns out that basket weave is an actual weave structure that we can make into fabric here on our looms. So it doesn't just apply to, baskets. Basket weave is a legit structure and we should learn more about it. So here we go. Let's start off with kind of understanding exactly what it is. Now, whenever I do research for one of these episodes, I turn to all of the greats, and I found a wonderful definition from my girl Marguerite. She says, Handbook of Weaves define a basket weave as a plain weave in which two or more adjacent warp and filling threads are raised and lowered together as if they were a single thread. Pretty straightforward, right? Now, I also found much more complicated definitions that had 6 treadles and 3, and because, we're weavers. Of course, we like to make things more complicated. But for the purpose of today's conversation, we are going to stick with Marguerite's definition of having 2 warp and 2 weft yarns that are working as a single thread. Ultimately, friends, think of basket weave as just plain weave that's doubled both directions. That's what we're working with. So let's dive into how do we actually weave ourselves some basket weave. So you've got options with basket weave, which is lovely. I like a simple pattern that gives you choices, right? It helps you be more creative and stretch yourself. So let's talk about how do we actually construct basket weave. The warp. Let's start there. Now, as we heard in our definition, the idea is we need to have 2 threads that are working together. So imagine that you are going to be raising like neighbors. Like you have 2 yarns that are next to each other, they're gonna lift and lower together all the time, the whole entire pattern, right? So you have a couple options for how you can do that. I set up my loom in just a straight draw threading, right? So that means that as I'm creating my basket weave, I am always gonna lift 1 and 2 together, and then I'm gonna lift 3 and 4 together, which guarantees that as you look at my warp yarns, the neighbors are together. So I always have 2 yarns acting as 1, right? So that's how I'm going to treadle it. So I always have 1 and 2, and then I got 3 and 4. Easy enough. Now, it actually gets easier than that. If you have a 2-shaft loom, maybe a rigid heddle, maybe just a 2-shaft like a rug loom, you can absolutely do this because all you need are 2 shafts. So you would just put your neighboring yarns on shaft 1 and the next set of neighbors on shaft 2 and 1 and 2, and so on and so forth. Voila. Easy enough. Let's talk about the weft. Now, as you understand the pattern, we are having 2 yarns that are together that are acting as a single thread. Okay, so again, we have choices. In my situation here, what I've done is that I have done a straight draw for my threading, and I have added some floating selvages. I am going to be playing with some other things in this project, so that's how I set it up. So therefore, in my boat shuttle, I only have 1 weft yarn. So I'm going to double it up. Here's what that looks like. I'm going to lift shafts 1 and 2, right? The first part of the equation. I'm going to send it across the width of the project. I'm going to bring my beater bar forward and back, leaving everything as is, and I'm going to take it right back the other way. So ultimately, my weft yarn just wraps around that floating selvage and gives me a doubled up yarn. Voila, right? Here's your other option if you don't want to work with a single, so you're doing 2 passes with the same yarn. You could actually take 2 yarns. Look at that. 2 yarns together. Can you see them? Since they're white, they're kind of hard to see. Take 2 yarns together and just fling those across your project. So then you're only doing 1 pick, 1 throw at a time, and you have your 2 yarns. Now, here are the advantages and disadvantages. The advantage to having a single is that you can better place your 2 yarns so they're stacked right next to each other. If you are winding your 2 together, they may kind of twist over each other. So you always have 2, but they won't be as kind of nice and neat. However, This one, half the work of this one. So you have choices for how you want to construct your bold and beautiful basket weave. Now let me leave you with kind of a parting thought here, is to talk about the application. Where do you want to use basket weave? Now, like we've discussed, plain weave is a tighter pattern than basket weave, right? Basket weave, you're always jumping over two, at all directions, all the time. They're always jumping over two. So you have longer floats, which means it's going to be a little looser kind of pattern. It's going to shrink more. So it's going to act differently than plain weave. So ponder how you want to use that. Here is my suggestion, friends, is to use it as a fun accent in a piece where you're already doing plain weave, right? You already have it set up. Just use it as like a design element in your project. It's a great idea. You can absolutely do an entire project in basket weave. Of course you can, but just be aware that it is going to act very differently than plain weave, just because of the proportions of everything. You've got, it's always jumping over a couple. So it's going to shrink more. It's not going to be kind of as sturdy a fabric as plain weave. Maybe that's great for whatever you have planned for the end result. So keep that in mind when you're considering not only how to put together your basket weave, but how it's going to be incorporated into your project. You know, what's the end game here for you? But it is so fun, and you should absolutely try some bold and beautiful basket weave in one of your upcoming projects. It has a very cool look to it for sure, and because it's so simple, you actually have a lot of ways that you can dress it up. Play with the colors. You could actually put 2 different colors in your weft. Play with the spacing. It's just, yeah, it's a lot of fun. So if you haven't done basket weave yet, or for a while, bring it back in. It's like an old friend. Come on, basket weave. Let's party on the loom together. So let me know, have you tried some basket weave? And what has been your impression? Do you love it? And you're like, oh yeah, I throw that basket weave in all over the place. Or you're like, well, it's not quite my thing, but I can appreciate its, you know, its good properties. All right, friends, think about some basket weave this week, would you? Have a wonderful week, and happy weaving.